Our speaker tonight is Mr. John Munka, and Mr. Munka served with the Marine 1st Division, the 27th Infantry, and he served for 3 years in the South Pacific. And I believe that means he didn't get to go home till maybe he won the war. I don't know. But that wasn't unusual for some people. I think there was an Army division out of the Akron area that left and went to the South Pacific and spent most of the war there. I remember my friends in college, his dad was a veteran of that, and he was gone for almost 4 years. So, but without further ado, I want to have Mr. Munka come up and join us and regale us with his stories. Mr. Munka.
Good evening. My name is John Munka. I'm here with my wife, Anna Marie, who's put up with me for 63 years, my sister, Mary Jane, and my brother-in-law, Dan, who served in the Navy for his country. You're fortunate tonight. I had a 40-page speech written out, but I left it at home. It's all boring. So anyway, we'll go thing like this. But anyway, I've lived in Akron all my life, except for 5 years that I dedicated to the government, 1.5 years with the 3 Cs in Idaho, and 3.5 years with the U.S. Army. And I survived them all. But anyway, I was drafted in October 1941, before the war started, with quite a few personnel from Akron and from Cleveland, and we all went to Camp Walters, Texas for our basic training. Camp Walters is about 50 miles from Fort Worth, and we did have quite a, how should I say, mixture of people from all over the country. And we, our furloughs, we would go to have time off. We would go to Fort Worth, and we had a surprise on December the 7th. We were going into the theater, my buddy and I, and he mentioned that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. Of course, our first reaction was, I don't know, like most of you, we said, "Where's Pearl Harbor at?" But anyway, we had our basic training there, and the war came, and our program was accelerated. And usually when your basic training is over, you get a delay en route to go home for a vacation. But with the war starting, they immediately sent us to San Francisco, where I joined the 27th Infantry Division. And I was in the Army, not the Marines. But anyway, we joined them, and we shipped out from San Francisco, went to Hilo, Hawaii. There in Hilo, we landed in a hellacious rainstorm, and we put all our gear on the docks, and the first thing they did, put us in the ship's hold to unload ammunition. So we're unloading these big 105 shells, you know, and very gingerly we're laying them down, but Navy man said, "What are you worried about? They don't have a fuse in them, they won't go off." But we're still hard to convince, you know. So anyway, they set us up in the schoolhouse temporarily. Then we went to the northern part of the island, where we bivouacked in the rain for 6 weeks. I mean, and I couldn't believe that it rained that much in Hawaii. But we volunteered once in a while to string barbed wire and make gun emplacements all around the island. And you would get into the sunshine when you got into what they call the desert, the northern part of the island. But anyway, we were about a half a squad. We had 5 miles in each, 2.5 miles in each direction, 5 men. And we were just mostly there to, not to defend against the enemy, because we had our attack all planned to retreat. I mean, and we watch a retreat area. So, and after that, we were transferred to the island of Oahu. That's the island with Honolulu. And we were on the same regime. We had beach positions, and when we landed there, we had one platoon that was put right on Waikiki Beach in the hotel, and but we were stuck. My squad was stuck on the end of Waikiki Beach And we envied the guys on the beach. Oh, they're right on Waikiki Beach, and they got swimming and stuff. Turned out we had the best deal of all because the officers had nothing to do because all the troops were scattered all over, and they just had to visit them occasionally. So and we were isolated. In fact, we were there about 3 or 4 weeks before any officer found us. And, and of course, by then it looked like the islands wouldn't be invaded, so we kind of got a little lax on doing things. And particularly, one day I was on guard duty. You're supposed to be on 2 and off 4, the usual routine. And 9 times out of 10, it never did work. I mean, so we would stay on 4 and off 8, so that way you get a little sleep and relaxation. But this one day, the officer came and he hit the invasion button on us. And I'm on guard duty, and nobody is there but me. I mean, And so I grabbed my helmet, gas mask. I dashed to my anti-aircraft machine gun position. No loader, though, to load the ammunition. I was going to fire the gun. The officer came and he says, "Where's everybody at?" And I think, oh boy, everybody's in trouble. They're all AWOL. You weren't supposed to leave beach position. But we were in a cottage type of complex where they had a lot of small cottages, real exclusive place. In fact, there was a general in the hut right behind our tent, but he was a 1-star general, and he was kind of hard to get along with. You had to be spit and polish, helmet on, stand at rest when you're on guard and all that. But he was so busy most of the time that we didn't see him. But anyhow, this one older fella used to come down. We had a beautiful spot to swim. They had cut a hole through the reefs, and they had what they called the yacht basin right at the end of Ala Moana Canal. And all the ships, the yachts for the rich people were there. They weren't allowed to go out anymore, But we had a dock that went out there, and we could swim right off the pier in deep water. Whereas Waikiki Beach, if anybody's been there, I mean, you walk out waist high, and you're on the reefs. You can't walk on the coral stuff. But we had this older fella that almost every evening he would walk down there, in his bathing trunks, and says, "How you doing, soldier?" "Fine, fine," And of course, by then we had a nice easy chair to sit on, gun setting over here, equipment off, because it was hot all the time. And this went on for several weeks, and I'm on guard duty one day, and I see this brass coming down the walkway. So I get on, I put my helmet on, put my gun on, belt, and I'm standing there resting. And who's coming down there but this white-haired fellow, 3-star general. And I thought, oh my goodness gracious, I mean, things like that. And I think I hung there with my mouth open, and he looked at me and he smiled and winked, and he says, "At ease, soldier," and he took off swimming. But ever after that, when he came down, I mean, we would salute him. But real nice guy. In fact, while we were there, one of the cottages was, I don't know if any of you read the Tarzan books. Edgar Rice Burroughs was the author, and he had a cottage in there, and I was fortunate to meet him, and he was a major in the Correspondence Corps, and he kept track of all the wars, but we were isolated from the European War, and so we didn't know what was going on, but we'd stop by in his shack, and talk to him and have a nice time. But then after we got off beach positions, we would go into training for a few weeks, and then we would also be on a flying squadron type of thing where you had to be on the alert all the time. You slept with your boots on and your clothes, all except your ammunition belt. Of course, you couldn't take that. And you had to be ready at a moment's notice to get out there. They hit the siren. If you weren't on the truck in 2 minutes, you were in trouble. But that was, as things started winding down, although we were excellent soldiers, of course, we would goof off, and you wouldn't want to take your mask with you, and your hard hat, your helmet, and the rest of it. So we'd go out there ill-equipped on these sojourns. But they pulled a sneak inspection on us once when they called us out. And so we'd lined up 3 squads, and everybody passed their gear to the front. The front row was completely nice. By the time the officer passed by, they passed it all back. So we had about a third of our equipment, but we were 100% dressed. So, but as I say, then when the threat of the invasion was over, we went into intensive jungle training, and from there on, I mean, we took off and we were in the Central Pacific. Now, he mentioned something about the Ohio. The Ohio 37th Division, which was Ohio, went to the South Pacific, but the 27th Division was the New York Division. That's the one we were just dumped into. And it was kind of a not so good because we were all draftees from the Midwest, and we had a lot of these, we called them Herkimer jerks. I mean, they were from Herkimer, Iliad, and a few other towns up in upper New York. But so we would get out on detail all the time, and my buddy and I noticed that the only ones on the details all the time were us newcomers into the division, not the old National Guard men and things like that. So we decided to get off the truck, and we went down to Honoka, Hawaii to get a good meal. You could get a good steak dinner for 85 cents with all the trimmings, you know. Makes you sick to think about that, 85 cents, you know. But anyway, there all the old timers were down there. What are you guys doing? I said, well, we got a pass. I mean, you know, we're not issuing any passes. You're on wartime alert. And we got the same pass you do. They were going to court-martial my buddy and I, but fortunately, our sergeant, he was on our side. He told me, he says, I'm going to report you guys if you turn my men in. So anyway, so that's, although we were good soldiers, I mean, we all goofed off once in a while. Anybody that's been in the service that hasn't goofed off, I mean, is fibbing a little bit, you know. But anyway, after our basic training, we went into combat, Central Pacific, and on our one operation, we were supposed to invade Kwajalein Atoll, and I don't know, atolls. If you're familiar with atolls, they're extinct volcanoes that came up, and then when they sunk in the middle, and then they had like rosary beads around, and Kwajalein was the largest atoll in the world. Beautiful scenery. But we didn't get to fight because the battle went with the initial invasion forces. The battle went pretty well for them, and so they had us sitting there, fully combat-loaded regiment, and no place to go. So they decided, I guess the brass decided that they were going to find an operation for us. So we were on board ship 45 days, just waiting for an invasion to go. And it got kind of boring, so they finally let us swim off the ship and in the lagoon. But then we finally went to Eniwetok and landed, and our invasion was kind of fouled up like a lot of them were. The first place, we had these Amtraks instead of these LCVPs, which is a tank-driven boat. I mean, it has tank treads, and when you're in them, you can touch the water over the side. But when you get on land, they're about 7-foot drop, and we had 70 or 80 pounds of equipment with us, and you had to jump off. Lucky we didn't break any legs, you know. But the extra equipment, being in the infantry and riflemen, we also had mortar squads and machine gun squads. And of course, those boxes of machine gun ammunition, you've probably seen them, long 500 rounds. And mortar shells are pretty heavy. They're like an aerial bomb. And so the mortar men carrying their equipment, they could not carry all the equipment. So every infantryman had to bring so much of this equipment in. That's why we weighed so heavily. But the minute we hit the beach, I mean, we dumped them all off and got rid of our gas masks, unfortunately, you know. But anyway, after Eniwetok, when we went back to, we had a few casualties, but not too heavy as considering some of the further invasions we were on. But so we went back to the Hawaiian Islands to regroup, replace some of our troops, and the intensive jungle training again. They took us up into the mountains, and you lived in your pup tents. I mean, you know, and of course we had bugs and everything else to go with, and in fact we went into some old artillery ranges, and they had signs all over, and they warned us never pick up a shell or anything like that. Well, one guy did, and we went back to our barracks, and he was showing it off to somebody, and he dropped it and went between his feet and went off. It was a live artillery shell. And fortunately, he just lost one or two toes, but half the barracks had shrapnel wounds, and fortunately, nobody was killed. Then we loaded again and for battle, and we were supposed to invade Guam. Now, the 2nd and 4th Marines were supposed to land on Saipan at this time and take the island, and we were what they call the floating reserve, our 27th Division. And when we got there, and then we were supposed to invade Guam, and the 7th Division, which was coming out of Hawaii, was going to be our backup crew. But incidentally, I mean, if anybody has any questions on any of these things before I go, just raise your hand. I mean, you know, I'll try to answer them for you. But anyway, the Marines, the 2nd and 4th Marine Division had landed, and they, after 5 days, they had the island cut in two. They had the Japanese pocketed on the southern part of the island, and everything was fine until the Japanese attacked. And by the end of the 6th day, they had a 200-yard beach is all they had, and they were well decimated. So they had to call on us for help. Now that's the bad part of the operation was that Holland M. Smith, the Marine Corps commanding general, was in half of it, and I think he was crazy because they nicknamed him Howling Mad Smith. But you know, you've heard the story quite often of Tarawa and Macon. Well, our 105th Infantry Division took Macon. The Marines landed on Tarawa. But when they went into the beach, the tide was lower than expected, and it hadn't come in yet. And so the LCVPs could not get across the reefs into the shore, to the sandy part of the shore. And so the Navy men backed their boats off a little bit, see? Well, Holland Smith screamed, you know, through to the officers, you know, what are they doing? He says, well, they can't get over the reefs. They're going to have to dump them off on the reefs. So he says, those are Marines. So the Marines suffered 2/3 of all their casualties out on the water because they had to walk about 300 or 400 feet across open reefs and open waters, and the Japanese just shot them to pieces. Whereas our invasion on Macon was just the opposite. Our commanding officer backed them off until the tide came in, and they went in, they had a lot fewer casualties. But anyway, on Saipan, when we went in through the Marine lines, the Holland Mad Smith was our commanding officer, so to speak. But he hated the Army. I mean, it was a well-known fact. And he was all Marines, I mean, all gung-ho. And I don't know what any of you were, Marines, I mean, that served under him or not. I mean, you know. But anyway, we went into the islands, and they had, after a couple of days, we took Sligo airfield and moved in and kind of stabilized the southern points and stuff, slowly moving up. But we came to this big open valley, and I was with the 3rd Battalion, and we were the assault forces. We were in the front lines at that time. And we came to this big open valley, and our objective that day was supposed to be out in the middle of this valley. Well, the Japs held the mountains on both sides of us. I mean, you know, it was just like sitting in a bowl, and it had been a sugar cane field, and they'd all harvested the sugar already, so we just open plains, nothing, just a dirt road going down through the middle. And our colonel, High Mazzoni, radioed back, and he said that it was an untenable military position because it was out in the open and there's no protection and stuff like that. Well, Holland Smith, who was the commanding general, resented having to ask us for help anyway. Left a few, he cursed quite a bit, you know, and told about the so-and-so army chickens, you know, and to get out there. So our colonel said, well, we have our orders. So we went out there, and unfortunately, my company, I Company, and K Company were the two companies that went out. I mean, we're walking out in open area just holding your breath. And of course the Japs, they didn't fire at us at all until we got 2 companies out there, and then all hell broke loose, so to speak. You know, they hit us with mortar shells, machine guns, rifle fire, and pinned us down for most of the day. And we lost practically my whole company and K Company, and out of I don't know, 80 men, I think there were only about 4 or 5 of us still left alive at the end of the day. But then the Japs send 4 tanks up against us, and our artillery, of course, it was open valley. Say it was a bad position. By the end of the day, we were pretty well decimated. But to this day, that valley is listed on the maps as Death Valley. They named it Death Valley, which it was. But anyway, good Lord provided, and we did finally take the island and counted our casualties. We had and I had lost. Well, to go back a little bit, we had us rookies from the Midwest. When we joined, we all wanted to be together, buddy system, you know. And so we were that way. I mean, like my best friend and I, we just went in the same squad. We did everything together, you know. And but just before we went to Saipan, we got or after Saipan, we had before Saipan, we had this officer come in. He was a real nice guy, and he said, buddy system is fine if you can, if it doesn't conflict, because you can't, because you've got your scouts, you've got your riflemen, you know, and you got your machine gunners and more. You couldn't put all of them together, you know, if it didn't conflict, because so we all kind of got together in the same. So unfortunately, when we went out into Death Valley, I mean, practically everybody that I went into the service with from Ohio, why, we were stuck out there. And I lost practically all my buddies, and it made a big difference because afterwards I had nobody to relate to anymore. I mean, no close friends. And my best friend, fortunately, he just got wounded, so he survived, but I'd lost most of them, and it's kind of lost feeling. You didn't care after that what you did, but funny thing, you know, you think everybody thinks there's a sixth sense that sort of warns you, you know, but I was always of the feeling that there's no sixth sense to warn you, like in danger or something. I think something your ear picks up or your eye sees, you know, that and it warns you ahead of time, you know, that maybe you moved and you say a bullet just missed you, you know, why did I move, you know, but I always thought that, but there were some instances that I found very hard to explain. Particularly one morning, early in the morning, I was kind of having a feeling about somebody, and I saw somebody. We were moving, and I saw somebody get shot, but the face was a total blank. And I think, well, what is this? Anyway, about halfway through the day, and we were moving up, and I heard bullets are always whistling past you. Good thing they passed, to tell you the truth. But anyway, and just I heard somebody let out a moan behind me, and I did not have to turn around. I knew who it was. The picture that I had thought all day long, I mean, his face was there. And I thought, you know, I had nothing to do with sixth sense or this young kid in my squad. I mean, you know, we in the morning we started moving out, and I looked at him. I thought, he's going to get killed today. And I thought, no. So I thought, well, I wouldn't put him out as a scout today. I mean, I put him in the back. We had to send messages back and stuff like that. So the whole day went by, and we finally got a guy with a half-track came and brought us some water, and we didn't eat much in food. In fact, on Saipan, I weighed 155. I think I lost 12 pounds in 7 weeks there, you know. I'd like to do it now again, but anyhow. And I thought, oh, that was just a thing, but this artillery shell hit right square in the middle of our food and stuff like that, and the concussions, I was stunned, you know, concussion, but I didn't have to look. I knew he would be one of the guys that was going. So as I say, that's I don't know. I don't know what it's got to do with the war, but it's a surrealist thing. But anyway, on Saipan, we had 3,500 dead in 7-week period, which was equal to the first 3 years of the Iraq War. So it was hard to imagine, and also we were, of course, the infantry. I don't know whether you like statistics or not, but the infantry only composed 14% of all the armed forces, and yet they suffered 70% of all the casualties. Which was a high rate, and anyway, after Saipan, we went to. They sent us to Espiritu Santo, which is one of the islands in the New Hebrides, which is someplace just northeasterly of New Zealand, and we'd never heard of it before, but we went down there to regroup and get our new recruits and things, and by a strange coincidence, we moved 30 years ago to where we live now, and the fellow next door and his wife both had been in the service. He was in the military, but she was a nurse, and I says, well, where were you at? She says, oh, in the Pacific. And I says, oh, we're in the Pacific. I was in the Central Pacific and in the South Pacific. And she says, oh, she said, in a miserable place you never heard of before. She said, Espiritu Santo. And I thought, do people ever hear of Espiritu Santo? But anyway, so this is an awful small world at that. But anyway, we come back, and of course we went into, we were in jungle training again. And of course I was fortunate. I never got wounded, but we come out, we were in jungle training. We had this fella that, he was from Kentucky, real lovable guy, but he wasn't too smart, but I never saw him angry at anything, but he was good. And he would go, and I look, he's in my squat, and he's wandering through. It says, mind area, stay out, So I run over to try to get him back. I thought, too late. He tripped over a wire, and a piece of shrapnel hit me in the arm, and I'm bleeding like a stuck pig, and I go to the captain. He says, Munka, he says, stupidest thing I ever saw. You go through combat and you don't get hurt. Here you go and get yourself wounded now. And I said, I suppose I don't get a Purple Heart, do I? He said, no. But anyway, from Espiritu Santo, there were 60 of us still left out of the original 189 that went overseas. And we'd been overseas for almost 3 years, and none of us had ever been home. So the rumor came out that we were going to get furloughs. So everybody, of course, loved that. But when the report came down, they were getting ready, of course, to go to another combat operation, and they couldn't know in the world they could send all the old timers back and just have a bunch of new rookies like recruits. So they gave us 3 furloughs per month. Well, the captain put all the names in the hat, and we had just gotten our mail. We hadn't gotten any mail for about 4 months from our operation at Saipan and on Saipan. And so we were reading our mail, and the captain has the helmet out there, and he pulls out two names. And of course, everybody's saying, he says, should I read them both or put them both back? And everybody half divided. And I says, Captain, we got mail to read. Just read them out. Mine was the first name on the list there. So I kind of lucked out, and I got to come home, fortunately. And after it was, I think we were a 20-day delay en route, and when I went back to, I came back to Atterbury, and then of course I took the train to Akron. But when the furlough was up and I went back to Atterbury, our shipping orders hadn't been cut yet, so there's a five-day delay, see. Well, there are 2 other fellows that came back with me, the other 2, and their orders were already cut. They came, one was from Kentucky and one from New Jersey, and so they left. So they put us in these barracks for 5 days, and then they're going to ship us out. And the order, Congress at that time was voting to discharge the men because the war in Europe was winding down. We're talking about April of 1945. And they were going to have a point system. But anyway, the Camp Atterbury got so full because they were funneling troops from Europe to go to the Pacific, and the veterans from the Pacific were coming through Atterbury, and it got so crowded that the captain decided he's going to ship us back. To heck with the orders, you know. So we checked out all our baggage and stuff. In the morning we get out and get ready to load on the trucks to go to the train, and the captain was out there, and this clerk runs out there real fast, and he had a note, and the captain just threw up his hand and he turned it over to the first sergeant. He said, go back and check all your bedding. All returnees overseas, are canceled temporarily, you know. Oh, great. And I thought, boy, those poor slobs that left yesterday, they're already on their way back there. But they turned that train around in Chicago and brought them back again. They were fortunate, see. But anyway, after horsing around for quite a while and counting the point system, they give you 1 point for every month in the service in the United States, 1.5 points for every overseas point, 5 for every medal in battle star you had, and on that same vein, the thought crossed my mind, I could kick myself. I was on the real heroes of the war, the medics. I mean, us riflemen and stuff like that. I mean, we'd shoot the enemy, but they didn't have any guns. But they'd go, and a guy got wounded. And they would go. But anyway, I was pinned down on combat, and this little Italian medic guy was over there, and he had a bad day. We had a lot of casualties. Seems like we always had a lot of casualties. But anyway, he came and he says, John, he says, I don't care if the general gets shot. He says, I'm not getting up out of here. And he says, I says, yeah, okay. And so suddenly somebody way over on the hill, you know, a lot of open space, hollered, medic. He gets up and grabs his bag and he starts off. I says, Joe, where you going? He says, the guy needs some help. I said, I thought you weren't going to go up to the general. He says, pardon my, he says, go to hell, Munka. You know, but he was, I hope he survived the war. I never did find out and stuff. But anyways, I say, I was counting my points to get out, and I thought, boy, that would have been 5 points, because he always wanted to write out, all you do is write out an injury report, and I'd have been a battle casualty, you know, and I got five points, you know. But I thought, I have enough. But anyway, I had 94 points. I only needed 85, see, with all the combats and stuff. And my buddy that I came home with, I kind of you make friends with everybody. And he was too short, and he had to serve 2 months in Atterbury, you know, on garbage detail and stuff and things like that. But I talked to him quite a bit after that, see. But here, one thing I talking to Saipan, most of you fellows can relate to this. It's a poem written by one of the survivors of Saipan from the 27th Division. But after the war, their 27th Division, New York Division, we'd have a reunion every year. I didn't go the first number of years, but anyway, I'd go after that. But anyway, this fellow wrote this poem from Saipan. So it's no Pulitzer Prize winner, but I thought it was okay. It says, I died for you today on a far Pacific island. If you are concerned, to say the least, I'll tell you who I am. I'm the soldier and the sailor. I'm the airman and the marine. I'm the lifeblood of your nation. You sent me to this scene. I'm the wiry American medic dodging steel to give first aid. I'm Catholic, Jew, and Protestant, and I serve in every rank. Call me Dominic, Smith, or Kelly, or pronounce my foreign name, and regardless of my color, when I'm hurt, I bleed the same. I'm Indian and I'm Mexican, I'm Polish, Dutch, Italian, and Greek, but I'm every inch American, and your freedom is what I seek. I came from every walk of life, from mountains to the slums. I've known hardship and depression. Still, I've watched our country grow. But when Uncle Sam came calling, I was proud that I could go. I've watched demonstrations and the people who protest, but I say, thank God for freedom. My country's still the best. So take your banners and your slogans, raise your placards to the sky. I'll defend your right to do it, though in doing it, I'll die. I'm your father's sons and brothers. I'm the arm of Uncle Sam, and I died for you today, my friend, on an island called Saipan. But anyway, the in our reunions, and we went, and most of the old timers, of course, they're decimated now. I think last time they only had about two guys from my company still on their feet. Some of them are, one or two of them are still in hospitals. The rest of them have passed away. But the 27th Division was disbanded as a division, and it was made into the 27th Brigade, which is the part of the 10th Mountain Division in New York. And right now they're in Iraq and Afghanistan fighting. And this is the first year we've not had a reunion scheduled because they're not there. But the newer brigade took over, and so all their officers and men and just a few of us old timers were still there. But anyway, in 2003, the Commodore announced that the governor of Saipan was going to send. They were going to have a 60th reunion of the invasion, which was 1944 to 2004, and they were going to wanted to have a reunion out there, and he would pay for one man from each division. Well, there's a 2nd and 4th Marines and myself from the 27th Division, and they had to select somebody. Well, this one friend of mine got up there and he says, I nominate John. He says, he won the Silver Star. He says, on Saipan, I think he ought to go and represent us. And of course, all the newcomers, I mean, they'd never been in combat or anything, so they couldn't object. So by a unanimous vote of 3 or 4, I mean, I was elected to go to Saipan again. And of course, I took my wife along too. I didn't want to go alone. But anyway, it was a real nice trip, and but it was long. My wife will attest to that. Her legs bothered her most of the way. But anyway, we went back, and the natives, the natives were Chimeros and Carolinians, and to get on their history, the Spaniards originally found the islands and developed them, but the Germans took it away from the Spaniards. But after World War I, as reparations for the battles, Japan got Saipan. Of course, we had Guam, which is in the southern end of the Marianas Islands, and we had Guam yet. And so the Japanese treated them like slaves. And but when we invaded, I mean, they all took to the hills and they hid in the caves, and they didn't know anything really about the war, what happened. I mean, because and then their kids, and then the third generation was asking them, what was it, and they didn't know. But then when we went back there, I mean, we had a couple of meetings with the natives. I mean, would question us and ask us stories and things like that, because as I say, they didn't know. As we moved up the island, when they'd come out of their caves, we sent them back to internment camp, and then after that, they'd send to one of the other islands because there was nothing left on Saipan for a while. So they didn't know. So they were grateful to talk, and they really treated us veterans royally. I mean, they couldn't do enough for us. I mean, in fact, the first day I came back from the hotel. We had a beautiful hotel, and in fact, the hotel was the property we're in right on the very invasion beach where we had come in. I mean, for the 27th Division had landed. They had several lemon, yellow, orange, red beaches, but this hotel happened to be right in exactly on that spot where we had come in, see. But anyway, right after breakfast, I was going up, and this young fella, he worked for the Navy, I guess, and he come up and he says, oh, we had badge, veteran of Saipan, and he says, come on, congratulate. And of course, yeah, puff up a little bit. Well, it's all right, thanks, But he had a darling little girl, about 4 or 5 years old. He said, say hello to the servicemen. She took a running leap and leaped up my arm. I'll tell you, brought tears to my eyes. I mean, I thought, but that's the reception we got from all the natives and stuff. In fact, we were stuck down. They built a memorial, a big, beautiful round memorial, and they had big rocks with bronze plaques, and on these bronze plaques were the names of every soldier that had been killed on the islands. Every service personnel was on there. And they were, in fact, they were building a new museum also, thing like that. But so we had quite a ceremony there, and this one of the speakers was Tibbets, that flew the Enola Gay, that dropped the atomic bomb. I mean, you know, on Hiroshima. I mean, he was there. He wasn't walking very good. He has died since then. I mean, I saw a year or two ago. He has passed away. But anyway, they wondered why on their maps that place was still listed as Death Valley, and then, you know, thing like that. Well, then of course, had been a participant in it, so I mean, I was able to give them a little information there, you know. But anyway, as I say, we were stuck down there, and this woman was standing there. She says, "Oh," says, "what?" He said, "Well, they don't have any buses or taxis or anything. The limousines and stuff belong to the hotels and and it's all tourist oriented." But anyway, she says, "Oh, no problem. Where are you going?" "At the hotel." So she gets her car and drove us all the way up to the hotel, and so we thanked her enough, you know. But that was the whole attitude of all the people on the islands, and so it was a nice visit. But Death Valley, I mean, we had a bus to go up there, and I'll be honest, if you had blindfolded me and put me on this island, and although I walked over maybe 90% of it, the island is about 5 miles wide by about 19 miles long, and if you'd have dumped me any place on that island, I would not have recognized it, because the jungle, they quit planting sugarcane and taro, which are root, and it was all jungled over. I mean, you know, in this big open valley, I mean, it was just a jungle. Well, it was 60 years since, I mean, I'd been there before. So. But it was quite an experience, and I enjoyed it, to go back there and visit. A lot of not so good memories there, but that was it. And then I come back home, got the discharge.
John, you mentioned, we talked. I landed the 4th Marine Division on the opposite end of the atoll, and you landed on the other end.
Yeah, we were on the south end, what it was.
On the Saipan, I was in the 4th Division of Saipan.
Yeah. Oh, well, then you know what I'm talking about, you know. We sure took a beating there on Saipan, didn't we? I'll tell you, you know. But, you know, and talk about snafus, when we landed on Enuitak, we had four tanks for our support. The first one, the cable broke, and they were out in the water, and of course it was heavy, and it immediately sunk, you know. The next two, I mean, they got in the sand, they got stuck on the beach. They couldn't get on the beach, the sand was too good. The fourth one finally made it. He made a right-hand turn and went up to assault, and our own Navy put a 6-inch shell through the side of it and killed the whole crew. But snafus of war, I mean, you know. The other thing, I think, when my buddy and I, our first combat operation, we were going, and the Japs were on these islands and atolls there. It's all flat, maybe not more than 10 or 12 feet above sea level, I mean, you know, any place. And so we were in a foxhole, and I says, I don't know where those Japs at. They were down underneath the palm fronds and debris they put over the top of them. And wait till we got past them, see? We didn't. We turned around, and they were about 50 feet behind us. Was the biggest guy I ever saw in my life. And they told us Japs were small, you know. And scared. We turned. He was as scared as we were. He turned around and took off. Well, he and I both shot expert on the rifle range. That means on a target about this big at 200 yards, I mean, you cannot miss it at all, or else you're not experts, you know. We fired 8 rounds each at him. We never did hit him. I don't think we were scared, were we? But anyway, then we went into Enuitak. We had a new lieutenant, Spencer Pitts. Don't think he weighed 100 pounds soaking wet, but he was a ROTC man, 2nd lieutenant. Boy, in training, he was all gung-ho. He says, man, will I get those Japs? I'm going to kill those Japs. He strapped a knife around his leg, you know, just like, whatchamacallit? Yeah, Rambo, yeah, type of thing. He had an extra pistol and all this and that. But we were in combat about 2 days, and suddenly he and I are sharing the same shell hole. We did a lot of time in shell holes because you're below the ground, and that was a safe place to be, you know. And he's like, he looked at me and he says, Munka, he says, if I mention one word about getting any Japs or shooting anybody, things like that, you can kick me, well, to put it delicately, where I sit down. He said, I says, yes, sir. And I says, I don't suppose you want me to salute you either, do you? You know, because the officer wouldn't comment. Don't salute an officer, because the enemy were just looking for that, see. But anyhow, that's about it. Any questions?
What kind of air support did you have?
Oh, we had tremendous air support. Like when we hit the beach, the Navy would be, and they'd totally bombard the island for a couple of days. And then as we were landing in, they would walk their artillery further inshore. And then just before we hit the beach, the Navy would scrape the beaches, I mean, you know, and supposedly clear them all out, you know. But then we were surprised how many there were still left there. But, you know, when we went into Saipan, well, real quick then, I mean, we had, at that time, you know, D-Day had started June the 6th, and we invaded Saipan on the 15th. So we had the largest naval armada ever assembled in the world at that time off of Saipan, because they expected the Jap fleet to come out. And when we were in there fighting, if we had a sniper on the hill or something like that, why we'd call back and say, well, we got a company of Japs, or we got heavy artillery and stuff like that. They'd saturate the hill and kill one little lone Jap. See? But we woke up one morning, we look out to sea and there's nothing. There isn't a ship there, and we didn't know what happened, of course. Just a few supply ships, you know, and tankers out there. And then we found out that Jap fleet had come out of the Philippine Islands, and the Battle of the Philippine Sea happened at that time then, where we defeated the Japanese Navy and stuff. But it sure was weird to see that. And but there are a lot of queer things like that. But anyway, and also we were like one night we were on Saipan. It was real quiet after night. You don't make any noise or anything. You don't get out of your foxhole at night or anything. And so quiet, you think you're all alone in the world, you know. But then we had this air raid, this Jap Betty bomber overhead, and I thought, what's he doing with his lights on and stuff like that? The light got bigger and bigger, and I realized he was on fire, see? And I thought suddenly it exploded, and the biggest cheer you ever heard up there. And I thought I was alone out there where there were. So anyway.
About how many Japanese defended Saipan, and how many were left, or did any of them surrender? Or?
Not many of them. There were over 30,000 Japs killed. See, they underestimated the island when they invaded. That's why it took such a beating. I think the Marines, 2nd and 4th Marine, I think they put about 20,000 troops on the shore, and then when the Japs counterattacked, of course, they had the numerical superiority of 30,000. So then we went there. So we were about one-on-one, and they just, most of the time they didn't like those odds. They like to be, you to have at least 2-to-1 advantage. But,
Who owns the island of Saipan?
the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Islands now, which includes Saipan, Tinian, Rota, and a couple of more smaller islands. Guam is still our possession in the southern part of the islands. But that Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Islands is the same as Puerto Rico. I mean, they have, I think they have a representative, but I don't think they have any vote in Congress. I mean, you know. I came home, I got married to my lovely wife, like they say on Wheel of Fortune all the time. They got all lovely husbands and lovely kids, you know. She's better than average. Best cook in the world, though. I mean, you know. Oh, I came back home and went to Akron U on the GI Bill, graduated mechanical engineer, and went to work for Boiler Works Company in design and stuff, and got big from my britches, went on to business myself, went broke, and then went to work for this company on drafting and estimating, and I guess I was a jinx because he went broke, but some other company bought him out, and one of the guys was a painting contractor. I did a lot of estimating work for him, and then he I went on my own. I had a partner for 30-some years. We were in industrial sandblasting and painting. We did water tanks, steel bridges, plants, and locks and dams. We did quite a few of the locks and dams on the Ohio River, where they about, many years ago. 25, 30 years ago, they renovated a lot of the locks and dams. We did a lot of sandblasting and painting there. So. Then I quit when I was 80. I'm only 39 now, but I quit when I was 80.
John, tell them about your 3 kids and your grandchildren.
Oh yeah, have three children, two girls and a boy, and have 17 grandchildren and 5 and 2/3 great grandchildren. I mean, yeah, my one daughter-in-law is pregnant. She's expecting in December.
Tell them about Mary Ann having 11 kids.
Oh yeah, my one daughter has 11 kids in New Hampshire. Thank God she went to New Hampshire. but she loves every one of them. I mean, you know, and they're gone. And some of the grandkids are married. A couple in Jacksonville, one in Oregon, and you got some on Nantucket Island. Some of them still stayed in New Hampshire, and but they're all great kids. But it was nice. Okay, anything else?
I mentioned Holly Mae Smith. I knew Holly Mae Smith. I was a wire sergeant on site maintaining at a place, and I got cussed out with him many times because we didn't have those wires to all the division companies
Yeah.
and times. By nightfall, when all the officers got together to plan tomorrow's strategy, I got cussed out many times by Holly Mae.
Oh yeah. Well, he was mad. I think, you know. Well, he fired on Saipan when we didn't take our objective in this valley. I mean, we got the crap kicked out of us. I mean, he fired our general, but they had a hearing on it, and they just reversed the decision and gave our general back another division, and they relieved Holland Mad Smith. I mean, you know, from his command. I mean, you know. But okay. Thank you for listening. It was an honor to be asked to speak here. Thank you.